Now, um, we are going to do this meeting a little bit differently as well. We had some hotties let us know that it might be fun to like try out like having like discussion moderators. So the four admin, which we'll introduce ourselves in just a few minutes, are gonna like sort of act as moderators like throughout this meeting. We have like some discussion questions that we thought up beforehand, and I'm gonna go ahead and copy and paste them into the chat. Just so everyone, if just some things to think about like as we're getting started, and hopefully we'll touch on them like throughout the meeting. And I'm really going to encourage like everyone here to utilize the chat to the best of your ability. If you think of like any discussion questions that you'd like to pose to the group, or topics that you think would be like really relevant to like what we're discussing like throughout the meeting, just go ahead and put it in the chat, and then one of us will like make sure that it's heard and that we like can touch on it throughout. So I'm copying and pasting questions. And alrighty. And I think that is all of my notes that I needed to mention. But let's go ahead and like get started with introductions and get to know one another. So for everyone, we're gonna do names, pronouns, and then we have like a little icebreaker question. And then once you're done with your introduction, you're gonna popcorn it and call on somebody else to introduce themselves. And our icebreaker question was kind of based on Adrienne Marie Brown's podcast Octavia's Parables, which kind of like goes through the book chapter by chapter, and uh they talk it through, and it's really cool. But they mention the uh idea of like a positive obsession in relation to like Lauren's like relationship to Earthseed. So the icebreaker question that we have is, what is your positive obsession? And it can be anything. So I'll start. That's okay. I'm Morgan. I use she, her pronouns, and my positive obsession is like crafting. I really I really love like to craft. And I think it's a really fun and like easy way to like be creative. And I feel like whenever I start a craft, I just can't stop thinking about it until I finish it, because I just get so excited and it's so fun. Okay, I'm gonna call on Finn.
Hi, I'm Finn. I use he, they pronouns. And my positive obsession would probably be journaling. I have like tens of journals scattered around this room, and I just love making them. And I will call on Ellen.
Sorry. I'm Ellen. I use they, she pronouns. And I think that my positive obsession right now, at least, is making playlists. I make so many playlists in one day because it's so much fun and there's so many possibilities. I'm gonna call on Nia M.
Hi, I'm Nia, and Yeah, drop your Spotify for real. Um, my positive, oh, my pronouns are they, she, and my positive obsession is music. And I will call on Nia Snelling.
Hi guys, my name's Nia. I use she, her pronouns, and I feel like my positive obsession is animals, stuffed and real. And I'm gonna call on Douglas.
Hi everyone, my name is Douglas. I use he, him pronouns. And I would say that my positive obsession will probably be adding songs to playlists, especially like the group shared ones. I like bombarding people with several different songs. So, and then I will call on, I'll call on Bryn.
Hi, my name is Bryn. I use he, they pronouns. And I would say my positive obsession is painting my nails or other people's nails if they'll let me. I love painting nails so much, and I have a very large nail polish collection.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna call on D.
I'm with Bryn today. They, she pronouns. And I would say my positive obsession is like, I think it's more of like the way that I consume like media, because I like will just get totally absorbed into like a world, whether it's like one made on TV or in books, and I like can't hear negative opinions about it, and I just like fall off the face of the earth for a while I'm consuming it, and it's kind of awesome. I will call on Beharls Van Leuven.
Hi everyone, I'm Charles. I use he, him pronouns. Look, I'm just gonna be real honest. My positive obsession is barbecue sauce and saying dilly gaff. Those are two of my passions. I'm gonna popcorn it to Lauren.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm a Hardcover Hotties admin, so I'll be helping out with discussion. My pronouns are she, her, and my positive obsession. Okay, I liked Charles's one about saying dilly gaff because I too love to say dilly gaff. But I would say recently going on walks since it's been nice out. I will like no matter what I have to do that day, I feel like I'll try and fit one in, like no matter what. But yeah. And I will popcorn to Amy.
Hi guys, my name's Amy. I use she, her pronouns, and I would say my positive obsession right now is probably my cat because I just got her last month, so I'm like really obsessed with her. Oh, and I will popcorn it to Stephanie.
Hi everybody, my name's Stephanie, also Hardcover Hotties admin. I use she, they pronouns, and I think my positive obsession, I'm gonna have to copy everybody else and say that it's music. I've just been listening to so much music, but it's actually a positive obsession because I feel like I've been bonding with a lot of my friends over it, and like how Douglas mentioned, just like adding to like collaborative playlists, and sending people songs and being like, oh, this made me think of you. But I've been obsessed with music, and the playlist that we made for this book, I've been so obsessed. It's so good. If you guys haven't listened, you should stream it. I'm gonna popcorn it to Ocean.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Can you guys hear me? I hope the music isn't too loud in the background. I like your background, by the way, Stephanie. But I'm Ocean. You're welcome. I use they, them pronouns. And I'd say my obsession is my cat, crocheting, and I don't do it as much as I should, but maybe like dancing in the rain. Also, if I like ever disappear, I'm like at work right now, but I'm happy this is getting recorded so I can rewatch, and I'll just pop in and like be catching up as much as I can.
We appreciate your commitment to be here.
I'm so sorry. My bad. Let me see who I'm gonna pop.
I think you're on mute, Ocean.
Sorry, that's embarrassing. I thought I unmuted myself. Okay, anyways. Sunny Sisterwood, have you gone yet? I'm popcorning it to you if not.
No, I haven't. And I don't know how to
Okay.
change my name on this. I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
No, you're totally fine. Yeah, I was just like, oh my God, that's like my entire like government name. But no, so I'm Sunny. I use they, she pronouns. I'm a newbie. I've never been to one of these before, but I've been following you guys on Instagram for like a million years, so I'm excited. And my positive obsession is bluegrass music. I have been making bluegrass music for like 5 or so years now, and it just gives me such pure joy. And I think there's also a lot of history and oral tradition that is involved in it. Can I explain what bluegrass is? Yeah, so bluegrass music is sort of a branch of American roots music that was really popular in Appalachia. It still is, but sort of started in the 1930s. Pretty much involves like banjo, guitar, upright bass, fiddle, and a vocalist, and a mandolin. And it's super, super cool. So if anyone wants to check it out, just look up bluegrass music on Spotify. And I love Valerie June. Oh my God, you guys are so welcoming. I'm gonna popcorn it to, let's see. Has Drew gone yet?
I have not. I'm so sorry. I'm also at work. So if I'm also popping in and out, that's why. But hi, this is also my government name. I don't go by Drew. Most of my friends know me as River. So hi, I'm River. I use they, he pronouns. And my healthy obsession right now would be, right now, I really have been obsessed with looking at all the graffiti on campus. So I walk around a whole bunch, and then I like to walk around and make note of all the names that I see and all the different kinds of styles they have. And it's really cool because you can see like actual artists like changing their style, but like still being able to understand who they are. So I think it's really cool. Oh, I have to popcorn it to somebody. Has everybody gone? I don't think any, I don't. I think has Kylie gone? I'm so sorry. Maybe.
No, I haven't
Jamie?
gone. I think I'm the last person. Oh yeah, Jamie
Like-
also.
Also, sorry. Go
I'm Kylie. My pronouns are she, her. I'd say my positive obsession is collecting ugly trinkets, like little dolls and stuff like that. And I'll popcorn it to Jamie.
Hey, I'm Jaime. Pronouns are he, him. I would say my obsession is probably one of my biggest ones is drawing in like any form of art, I would say. I think everyone's gone at this point, so I don't have anyone to popcorn to.
Thank you everyone for sharing. And yes, if you were write down all of these positive obsessions, because this was a great idea generator session, and I'm taking note of it. And yeah, so lovely to meet everyone. I'm going to pass it over to someone else to get discussion started. Yeah, and again, make sure y'all like type in the chat if you have any ideas like throughout the time that we're
I had a
talking.
quick question for
Yeah.
Sunny. My Wi-Fi is playing games with me. Can you all hear me? Oh, okay. I just want to know if you were from Kentucky, since you do like bluegrass music, since it's like the bluegrass state. I don't
You
know.
know, I'm not. I'm from Denver, but my family is from Virginia. So
Okay.
that was sort of my introduction. Are
Okay.
you from Kentucky?
Yeah, I grew up in Louisville, so I learned a little bit about
Louisville. That's how
yes.
you know.
I also have a question. If we're doing a moderated discussion, should we be like raising hands with the little signifier, or like how are we moderating?
The idea that we kind of had was that we're gonna like we have like the discussion questions prepared, and just to like we'll be like moving the discussion along. So if we notice that we're like sticking to one topic for like a certain amount of time and maybe think that it's like related to something else, like we'll jump in and be like, hey, what do you guys think about this? Just to yeah, keep notice of like time, and then also because there's so much to talk about with this book, so we want to make sure that we can talk about as much as we can. Good question, Brandon. Thanks. And also no, I don't think that y'all have to like raise hands. Just like feel free to like jump in whenever. I know like Zoom can get kind of hard also with like if you're like multiple people talk at once. We can even like type in the chat, okay, like this person can go, but then I noticed that like this one person wants to talk next. Just like leave space for like everyone to share.
Okay, and with that, I think we're ready to start off in our introduction. And this time, since we're reading a fiction book, we wanted to like pick just like a very impactful part of the book to just like get us talking. And for that, we chose the very like introduction of the book, which I'm going to read to you all. Okay. So prodigy is, at its essence, adaptability and persistent, positive obsession. Without persistence, what remains is the enthusiasm of the moment. Without adaptability, what remains may be channeled into destructive fanaticism. Without positive obsession, there is nothing at all. Earthseeds, Book of the Living. And we also wanted to talk about the quote that is like brought up again and again throughout the book, which is all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. So we wanted to just like start off by asking you guys what interpretations like you got either from like the introduction or from the idea of like change and God being change.
For me, the idea of God being changed kind of went against a lot of what my like previous conceptions of what God is, or like anything like that. I went to Catholic school literally my whole life. So there's like a very fixed idea in my brain of like what God with a capital G is. So like even reading that at the start, I kind of knew that this is gonna be a big like perspective changer, basically. And yeah, that was kind of my thoughts on it initially. And also I'm going to preface with I did not finish the book. So yeah, that's what I've got at the moment at this point in my progress.
I agree with what Lauren said. I went to Catholic school too, and I feel like most of what you're taught about God is like kind of like a set of rules that like doesn't change and has been there since the beginning of time. But also, I think something that's really hard for me as a person is change. I really, really heavily struggle with it, like change in routine or just like general change. But so I don't know, it was really interesting for me to read her perspective, and it made me think about change and like the good that it brings, and kind of like adding that like maybe like kind of sense of holiness to change made me think about it in maybe a more like positive or like sacred way, or like kind of just something that like is a constant, which like kind of sounds like an oxymoron, but like kind of changed as a constant, because you know, like thinking of like God as a constant. So I really liked it. I don't really know if I have a fully formed opinion on Earthseed, but I definitely had a lot of thoughts about it, if that makes sense.
I wanted to like share that, well, this, I don't know if you guys know like the coffee shop called Parable in downtown Columbus, but like I had no idea that it was, because I had no idea about the book, but I didn't know it was like, I'm assuming named after it. And then there's like that like sign outside that has like the God is change quote. And so then when I started reading the book, I was like, oh my gosh, wait, that's so cool. And that made me like love that place even more. But I was going to say about the prompt is that I took a Asian philosophies course last year, which like I really loved. And reading that introduction reminded me of like Buddhism and how like its kind of core philosophy is like that the only thing that is like permanent is like change, and like how everything is temporary. And when I like was in the class, like I will like my upbringing also was like pretty conservative, like my parents are pretty Christian, but like learning about all different kinds of like Asian religions like really opened my mind to like these kinds of different like ways of thinking. And I also like being someone who struggled with change a lot and like really has disliked change strongly, and I'm trying to like be more open and accepting of it. Like this book definitely made me like reflect on my relationship with change a lot more.
I definitely agree with what you just said about like what you brought up with Buddhism, and like that, just like the idea of earthseed triggering that, and just understanding like my own relationship to change. I feel like when I first heard this quote, I was really fine. Like the first half, I was like, okay, all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. Like I was able to like grasp onto that. But when it said the only lasting truth is change and God is change, that's when I really like had to take a moment and like reflect and try to understand what that meant for me, especially as someone who can at times be resistant to change. And currently, as someone that's like graduating and going into the unknown, I feel like that's when I'm feeling the most resistant to change, and trying to break that down by myself. But I did think about like the Buddhist teaching of like non-attachment and how change represents that. But I know that there's a part in the book where she's talking to someone and trying to explain like the religion of Earthfeed, and they're like, oh, this sounds a lot like Buddhism, or oh, this sounds like a lot like parts of like Catholicism, which was really interesting. Um, but she like still finds ways to differentiate what Earthseed is from those religions, which I don't know, made me think more about my own like perspective of like non-attachment versus change itself. I don't know. I think change is scary, personally.
I think it's really interesting that we're all sort of, and I did this too reading the book, but that we're all sort of like, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us who have spoken are relating our own experiences with like religion, with change growing up, and like applying that to the religion of Earthseed. Like maybe our own experiences are helping us interpret the book, like because we don't have anything besides like our own, like the things that exist to us in order to like sort of understand what the Earthseed is. Like I know, like being raised Jewish, this was like actually pretty easy. Like for me, grasping this concept felt similar to the way I was raised, because we believe in sort of God, not with a capital G, like God being in everything, in plants, in nature, blah, 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 which sort of like begets that like God is change. So when I read that, I was like, this feels like Judaism. But then just like you said, Stephanie, like it's not Judaism. And it's something completely new, which is, you know, so like meta, because it's like, okay, this is change again, you know, we're changing what religion is, even though the only sort of stakes that we have, or the only like ground that we have to stand on, is like our own upbringings, what we liked about them, what we didn't, our own experiences with religion. So reading this book, as someone who practices my religion and who, you know, comes from a minority religion, was really interesting to me. I saw a lot of similarities, but I also was like very clear the entire time, like this is not where I come from. And this is, it was really cool.
I also think it's interesting because so the concept of like God being change, if you think about like the conditions that they're living in, the dystopia, where it's like they're under like a pretty fascist government, and how, so as much as we think like change creates, so I'm not wording this well, but what Amy and Stephanie brought up about the Buddhist concepts of like non-attachment. So I think a lot of people fear change because it's going to change the nature of their attachments. But I think also that this religion being created as a response to kind of a world that was like forever, it was like changing, but in like very violent ways, and that like targeted like huge groups of people. So like the concept of like God being change is that like the positive changes that they themselves could like manifest in the world that they were living and the contexts. I don't know. I just think it's really interesting too, the way that like, especially with non-attachment ideologies, where when you are able to like not assign so much to I don't know, like your connection to like objects, people, yada yada, that it actually opens you up to like the whole connection of the world. I don't know, like it opens you up to the concept of God when you're able to release some of those attachments in a more like along the earth seed, or Judaism, or like the way you can see it in everything. I don't know.
I think another thing that I found was like really striking was the like deep understanding that she had of her own relationship to like religion, especially like being born to her father, like who was a preacher, and like being like exposed to that environment at such a young age. But I think it was like she's 15 when the book starts, and she said that like even before that she knew that like her father's God wasn't her God. And it is it just like also brought up a lot of ideas about like how at what point do we like reflect um on like the molding of our own worldviews, and like at what a like that starts from like such a young age, like when, at least for me, like but I don't think it was like actually validated until like much older, because we don't give like I think oftentimes, especially, okay, maybe I should take a minute to form my thoughts in my head so I can create a sentence. But yeah, never mind. That's it. I'm just gonna stop there.
Something that go ahead, Nia.
Thanks. I thought that it was interesting that you were talking about how, like, if God is change, well, there's a lot of bad change too, right? And so I just really like when I think that, dang, I'm forgetting her name for some reason. Olamina is faced with like really hard change. She like grapples with like hating God, or like, you know, and it's really beautiful that she can say things like God is neither good nor evil, and then like understands God as kind of like a presence that like doesn't have subjectivity. I'm reading from the beginning of chapter 20. It's just like a piece that she says, God is neither good nor evil, neither loving nor hating. God is power, God is change. The rest of it's pretty, I'll say it. We must find the rest of what we need within ourselves, in one another, in our destiny. So like not like relying on, you know, God as change to continue, but no, like having the strength within yourself to like deal with that. And having the strength within your community. I think that like speaks to interdependence, which is huge in Earthseed.
I really love what you said, Nia. I think you put that really well. And I think that it makes me kind of curious about how much she was affected by her upbringing and surroundings when she was thinking about Earthseed, because something that I think, obviously I'm not a theologist, I really am, there probably are religions out there that, you know, maybe have these aspects to them, but I feel like something that is like pretty unique to Earthseed is kind of that subjectivity of God, and also that kind of the way that Earthseed is, it does kind of just like call upon you to create your own, you know, kind of like be able to rely on yourself, and realizing that maybe you can't get everything from yourself and you can't get everything from God, which I think not being able to get everything from God is also something that is a pretty unique thing to Earthseed. You know, she doesn't really present this as some like saving grace. Yeah, it's not like some like this is what's going to like save you. It's like you have to like save yourself, you have to save your community. And that's something that like I think that she would not have survived without. Like I don't think she would have been able to make it through the book. She would have died. The book would have ended significantly sooner if she didn't have that like faith within herself to be able to accept that everything is going to change, and you know the whole God is change, and being like willing to accept that, and then feel strong enough to then go out and kind of create her own way and create her own path and create her own community.
I'm actually going to follow up on that, especially the points that Nia made about the characters hating God, because I feel like a lot of us probably have had like the parent or the gods of our parents. Like a lot of us have probably grown up in certain religions where we did not like God is professed as a force of love and acceptance and all of these other attributes that are supposedly positive. And I like how Earthseed takes away the positivity and it neutralizes it, because I think for a lot of us who grew up in religions, the religions of our parents, like regardless of what they like said in theory, with whether it be the Bible, the Torah, whatever, like what was spoken about was not often like the practice of the people involved. So it's like when you were feeling oppressed or like unloved by God, it was a result of like the way that the like just I don't know, I'm not making this as articulate as I possibly could, but so moving God away from like a human kind of entity where like there is a subjectivity, there is like a paternalism to it too, where it's like this is the father, depending on the religious background or whatever. Like if God can love you, God can hate you. And so I really like that the character like saw that within the way that they like kind of hated their parents' God, and through Earthseed was able to like God is a force outside of oneself, and like you have to, in order to participate in God in change, you have to muster the change in yourself, and the changes that you can't make alone, you have to join with others in order to do so. Like God is like a force in a movement, less so than an entity. So I just thought that was interesting.
Some of So I really liked like the notes that that people had about like how uh Earthseed kind of like forces us to reflect on like our own relationships to religion and like our own conceptions of it. And like she mentioned that like in the book that Stephanie like mentioned that passage. Um and I think I was like particularly reminded of like um Taoist philosophies of like balance, and kind of like ideas of like yin and yang, and how like change as something that's like change is both always like moving and constant, like Bryn had mentioned. And I read a book for like a philosophy and literature class last semester, which was like based a lot of it was like based on like the Tao Te Ching, and it was The Lathe of Heaven by Ursula Le Guin. And there what I found, I was like looking on Goodreads for like, because I had for like a quote that was like yeah, she's so cool. A quote that was like relevant, and I think that this really like stood out to me. And she talks about like the main character as somebody who's just kind of this like average guy who like he doesn't have really any like defining qualities, but she um talks about like his like this quote is in like describing his like just innate like averageness. And she says it was more than dignity, integrity, question mark, wholeness, question mark, like a block of wood not carved, the infinite possibility, the unlimited and unqualified wholeness of being, of the uncommitted, the non-acting, the uncarved, the being who, being nothing but himself, is everything. And I think that there's like a lot there, but it like I think that both Dee and Bryn had like a lot of like really awesome things to say about like how Earthseed is like um or God should like, and also Nia like mentioned this as well, like God is subjective, and like we are called upon to like create our own God. And like there's like so much power in like having that being like just nothingness, but both like everything, both everything and nothingness, and being like that uncarved like block of wood that is like meant to be like molded to like our own needs and desires, and like that is like just encapsulated by like change, which is so cool.
For me, one of the things that like caught my attention and actually like hooked me on to reading Parable of the Sower was just like the amazing job that Octavia Butler did with like world building. I as soon as the book started, okay, I started the book at night. I very naively was like, oh yeah, this is maybe something I could relax with before I go to bed. Yeah, like 2 chapters in, I was so scared. I had to listen to music afterwards. Like I was brushing my teeth and like looking around me after all like the reading all like the really um kind of like unsettling descriptions that like she starts us off with. So I wanted to ask you guys what out of everything that Octavia Butler like threw at us like in the beginning really caught your attention from this like world that Lauren is in and that as like readers we're being like thrown into. Also keeping in mind that like it does start with like a little preface in the beginning to like Lauren being younger and then going into the year 2025, which is another scary idea. But which parts like were really catching your attention from the world building?
Okay, I was really hoping you were gonna ask this question. This was like, I feel like the most like, I don't know, like this is what I'm taking from the book. This is what like I'm gonna like, this is like my primary take was like, this is like one of the first dystopian novels. I guess this like could kind of be classified under dystopian, you know, it's like speculative fiction, you know, there's a lot of genres it kind of falls into, but like this is like one of the first ones that I've read that like it just has the most possibility I felt like of coming true. Like I was reading this one, I think that's why it was like so terrifying to like, it was like bone chilling to read so many of the sections because I was like, I can see this happening. Like 2020 and also it being in 2024 and hearing like the years that people were born in, like the one like 24-year-old being born in like 2009, whatever, I'm not going to do math, but like I was like, my sisters and I were all born before 2009. Oh wait, no, he was born in 2002 and then he was 24 because I know, because I'm born in 2002. I was like, this is crazy. Is this what it's going to look like when I'm 24? Like I just like, I feel like a lot of the other like novels that are like kind of like sci-fi or dystopian, like sci-fi will like go like far future and you're like, okay, we're like literally in outer space. You can't really like reflect on that happening here. Or like the Hunger Games or something, like it doesn't really even feel like it's in the US or like in the world, like Earth, even though like maybe sort of is technically. But this was like they were on like US highways, they were in California. Like this I could, and also none of it was like so like supernatural. It was like all very realistic, like a new drug coming out or like a very growing gap between like wealth inequality or like needing walls around communities, like all of that type of stuff, or like food supply running short, climate doom, basically. That whole, I was like, wow, this could happen. This is crazy that she wrote this so like it was so realistic, I felt.
Yeah, I want to add on to that too, because like I feel like Octavia Butler is genuinely like prophetic, and like the way that she understood the way how our current world and the systems work and function, and how she can trace the trajectory, and not only trace that trajectory, but create like a world with living characters and narratives that we can connect to in like very real ways. I don't know, it's just very impressive. Also, I just want to, because I don't know if anybody's read any of her other books. I've read Parable of the Talents, so it goes more into the backstory of how Earthseed was created. And in that story, which was written in the 90s, she like one of the fascist presidents had the slogan "Make America Great Again." So like it just shows you how she truly understood everything. She's a
so smart.
She's a genius. It's true.
Yeah, that's just like absolutely amazing the way she was able to apply like a different context to the issues that she was already being presented in like the time that she wrote this book, but imagining a future where it wasn't something that you could ignore. And I feel like the thing that's the most like chilling for us as like our generation of readers um picking up this book is just how relevant it was to these like recent years that we've lived in. um you've heard it time and again, but just seeing like everyone's reaction to a pandemic completely shifted like my own understanding of what survival means, which is why I was able to find so many things that like mirror like experiences that we've already like had or like have had to worry about, and like what was being like presented in the book, and also just the racial aspects of it as well. How she imagined a future where people, obviously like the most of the characters that we're being introduced to in this community are people of color. I know that she's talking about, she like mentioned the um interracial relationships and like how that was being like seen, and like the amount of like danger that came from um knowingly, like people knowing about like someone's relationship status like with someone from like another race. And I don't know, it was just very, very on the head.
I felt like it definitely was like a history repeats itself moment, which was pretty cool. Scary, but cool.
I think I want to touch on something that Bryn, you said, and also Stephanie, you said, which was like the intentionality of her placing this story very near in the future. Like she wrote this in the 90s, like she, you know, it's not like in the very far future. And I think that when we're talking about things that really spooked us about this book, like that's like the scariest thing she could have said or done. And it was like, to me, a very intentional decision of hers. I think that like when the way that she sort of plays with like the past, the present, and the future, and like the way that she uses history was really interesting. Like there are narratives of like literal like runaway slaves, and like narratives of like, you know, agribusiness and big business taking over towns that remind me of like, you know, mining towns and things like that. Like she has such a knowledge of how to use the scariest things in history and like put them in a place where it's not so far in the future that we like haven't forgotten that they happen, but they are like super representative of what we not only have done, but like if we're not careful, like it's, you know, again, it's not like super, like it's not like superstition. It's like the humans have immense power and immense capacity for like evilness, and it's really scary. And then the last thing I wanted to say was that something about like her placing this story so near in the future, to me, like, well, she was designing not something like the Hunger Games where there's like a system that has already been put in place to replace the last system. It's not like a post-apocalyptic world where everything's gone or where a new dystopian, you know, governmental system has replaced it. Like she is literally mapping the demise of the world as they knew it or as we knew it. And I thought that was a really interesting way that she used time in her story.
I'm gonna try and formulate a thought if I can. I may need some assistance because I know Morgan and I have talked about this a little bit, but well, let me start. I haven't read the book. I'm sorry. But I did read Kindred by, and I also watched, I did like read and watched like they have the show on Hulu if you, well, don't feel like reading, but they also have like the book PDF, which I think I also sent out to Morgan and Stephanie and them. But basically, instead of being placed in the future, in the show, she's the main character. Her name is Dana. She's placed in like 2016, and she time travels to the past to like understand her like ancestry and basically like she can't really control being in the present and being in the past. And when she goes back to the past, she's in 1815, and she has to be a slave on a plantation where she has to basically like save the slave master's son. I don't think this is a spoiler, but I just won't say why, but she has to like protect him. And somehow he always ends up on the brink of death. I don't know why. He just, I guess, anyways. But to keep it relevant to like space and time, it talks about how in my class, my Black Urban Experience class, we talked about how to understand, well, this was about like race, but to understand like race, it's like a whole bunch of like multiple like identities intersecting as one. And therefore, there's like this like Newton's law that talks about how like time is like non-linear. So to look back at like time and like race and understand race, we would I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. But to understand like time and race, like we would be able to go back and like learn about like the untold stories that were talked about like in the past, because there's always been like, in terms of race, there's always been all these identities, even in the past. But we never heard those stories because it also says in the book that like by the time slavery ended and like the last person who was like enslaved died was when we stopped hearing stories. So the purpose of Kindred was to kind of be like, well, the only way to understand that actual narrative is to go back in the past and understand like what it's, and live that life and then come back and explain it in the future. That's why she wrote that. But in terms of time and space, and I think I asked Lauren this question, how did you all see it, I guess, like in the book in terms of the like untold, how am I trying to phrase this? Like the untold stories of, I guess, like the environment and like people's or like the characters like dealing with the environment, because I wish I could have written this down or like formulated this better. But basically, a lot of y'all talked about like how it's so interesting how you see like current themes now in the book, even though it was placed in the future. I guess I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I guess those stories would have had to have also possibly have been there or existed in the past to like go forward like in the future. So I guess like what are your all's thoughts on that? A long, winding ass question. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I would love to respond to that. One thing, so I'm gonna like reference a lot of different bits of media because it's all been kind of on my mind recently. I don't know who else is watching like The Last of Us, but like Apocalypse has been on my mind a lot. And I also finished watching The Wire recently, and I watched some clips of this documentary of the really underserviced parts and overexploited parts of St. Louis, and like the conditions that the people in Baltimore and also like the people in I think it's the north end of St. Louis were living in mirrored a lot of what I saw in like The Last of Us. And I think so. Also, I'm gonna mention another thing. So Ava Anderson, who sometimes comes to these meetings, posted this really, really awesome video of this Indigenous woman talking about like continuing to have children, how it's like not an option not to, and how like, so basically this all boils down to, I think a lot of Octavia Butler's predictive ability is a result of the fact that like Black people and especially Black women like live with apocalypse inside them. And also with the Norfolk thing, I've been thinking about how like apocalypse is kind of relative. It's like your place where you were born and like your time in the world and like what, you know, like other identities are ascribed to you by yourself or by your surrounding communities like set you up to experience apocalypse. Like I feel like the people in Norfolk were experiencing apocalypse when the vinyl exploded, and like people in prison are experiencing apocalypse, and Black people, every racial category who's ever been subjugated has experienced apocalypse. But especially in terms of the Indigenous woman, she was talking about how like in order to continue on culture, like Indigenous people have already experienced apocalypse because of the way that like Westerners and white colonizers took over their land and genocided them, like the only way to continue on, like the only thing to keep alive is culture. And I think Octavia Butler had an intimate like knowledge of that. And I think religion and culture are so deeply tied together in most places. And so I think the creation of Earth Song, along with this world that she built, which feels very apocalyptic. It is very apocalyptic. It's horrible. It's terribly scary, the fact that it's so realistic, but like, it's because the apocalypse lives in her, and it lives in like, it's in people's genes. It's in their like, it embodied. And also I think a lot too about the like flipping in terms of time, as you mentioned, Douglas, to like, so I have some friends who live with PTSD, and they say that their attachment to like the present moment, it starts to slip away really easily, and you start to feel really out of time and experiencing like not two like moments at once, but it's like
timelines.
Yeah, so it's like the you that you were during your trauma and the you of what you're experiencing in the present moment are happening at the same time, and it like feels like a loosened grip on reality. All this to say, yeah, I don't have anything to follow up, but I think those were like the idea.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm not be talking again. I'm glad you said that. Just bring it back to Kindred, not to be off topic, but it was interesting to say that because in the book, she's like, and also in the show, she's like linked to the like what like the slave master's son. Like even though she's in the present, so like whenever he's in danger, that is when he like calls on her, like, so whenever whenever he feels like he's about to die, he like calls on her to come and like, and then she saves him. Whereas the only way she can go back to the past, to the present, is to be like on the brink of death. So I see where you're talking about, like where people's bodies may be there, like she in the like in the movie and in the show, she was like also physically like moving back to, it wasn't just like, oh, like her soul just got up and left, like her physical body was leaving too. So I understand what you're saying. And lastly, because I had a thought, but it just slipped me. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Douglas, your initial thought made me think of the TEDx OSU talk thing. Sophia Antone, her talk about like not asking like people like where are you from, but kind of how she started wondering like when are you from, and like phrasing it in that way. And how and how like she formed her identity off of like various points in like her family's lives. So like when her parents moved, and like when like all of these different things, like just different times. And then that made me start thinking about like the passing of like longings through families and like goals and stuff. And kind of how like Lauren's view of the world is like not like significantly different from like her families and her communities, but like how they just see things differently, and that's getting passed on through like family, and as well as like different forms of like identity and stuff. Yeah. Okay, I've been trying now for a couple minutes to find the quote, but I can't. So we're just gonna have to go from memory. But there's a quote from Octavia Butler about writing Lauren as kind of a character who, even after her death, like in the book's world,
like after her death could kind of be viewed as some sort of like prophet. So like, did you guys relate to that perspective? Like, do you kind of feel like that's who Lauren was? And I also wanted to know more about what you guys thought of Lauren as a main character, personally. Yeah.
I definitely thought of her as a prophet, but I feel like she touched on that and was like against against like other people thinking that of her. And I think, but especially like when she started meeting other people who had her like same empathy, like feelers, like it kind of took some of that like unique, like prophetic, maybe self-ideation away. But I also wanted to touch on what you said, Ellen, about like thinking of when people are from. I'm sorry. Thinking of when people are from. I have a friend who's like a professor at University of Washington, and she was teaching about like the idea of the long and wide self, like how you are who is behind you and who is in front of you, and a part of that, as well as wide, like in your community you are, you know, you are a part of something vast. So it's really cool and interesting, and if you want to talk about it anytime, hit me up. I have like some written work on it I can share.
You should definitely share that with all of us. I would love to see that.
Yeah, let me see if I can find it.
Unrelated to the book or any of this conversation, but I freaking remember you from skating now, Nia. Or yeah, that's all.
Like roller skating or skateboarding?
Skateboarding I mean, you'd do both. I remember your knee pads. You'd hang out with Scar and them at the law.
The knee pads.
Throwback.
One of the things that I thought was interesting, Bryn, going back to your question, was the way that Lauren was able to remove, well, in terms of like her conceptualizing Earthseed and her relation to it potentially being perceived as one of like a prophet. I thought it was very interesting how she was able to have like more of a bird's eye view on it, like for herself, and monitoring the way that she was like speaking to other people about Earthseed. I liked how like the dedication that she took, and the parts that I saw that really mirrored aspects of like community work and community building and what it takes to do that, because essentially I feel like very easily you start reading the book and the way she's talking about Earthseed and you're like, this is a community, this is the it's a religion, but it's also a way of life for all the people who are going to take the step of making it out and trying to find like a world and like a livelihood like beyond like what's already present in the book. And just like especially when she talks to, what's the name of like her lover in the book? I forgot his name. You guys know what I'm talking about. Anyway, when she's talking to her lover, she really breaks
which
down.
one?
Oh, okay.
The
Good question.
the older one,
older
or
one, the older.
I think
yeah,
it was,
the older one.
I think it was Bang. I don't know.
Ben Cole. Oh, yeah.
Ben Cole, right?
Oh, yes, Ben Cole. Okay. So when she's talking to him, she's basically seeing him and like understanding the privilege that he has, and the resources and access that he can give her to make her dream of like Earthseed like into a reality. And she like dedicates so much time like explaining and answering any questions with the understanding like there's a possibility that like she won't be believed. And we see that like very early on as well when she's telling like her best friend about Earthseed, and is met with like an understanding like reaction and like basically getting in trouble over it. But um yeah, I think she really saw the importance of getting everyone fully on board and like trying to understand and like align themselves and like the goals and values that she wanted to bring in like Earthseed. And I thought that that was just something that's very relevant to what we see now with like people trying to engage in like community work and community action. You do have to take like that additional time to fully break everything down and make sure everyone's on the same page and like value system. And we see areas where like there are flaws in the small like protected space that Lauren is already in with her family, which is supposed to be like a semblance of community that's already based on an existing religion. But we're seeing all these like gaps in people really believing, sharing like a set like ideology, which is like evident through like characters putting everyone else in the community in danger just for um like the possibility of making like some extra profit off of something, or like people who are like, oh, so that the community decided to like make this decision, and then there's someone like, oh yeah, our family doesn't really work that way. And I forgot what was the name, was it Richard Moss who was doing that? I don't know. But that one family who was like basically doing everything that like was against what the community was about. We're seeing a lot of that in the world that Lauren is already in. And that like is already supposed to be like a protected space that obviously didn't work. And we see her just taking like all these extra steps when she's trying to like convey those ideas to like new people and make sure they're like fully on board. Um, I don't know, I really admired like her leadership in like that sense, because it takes a lot to have like such a big complex idea and like be able to communicate it not only like in a way that other people understand, but in phases, and like making it as accessible and open to questioning as possible, which is something that really I haven't had in my own experience with religion. Um, I really, yeah, you slayed that. Um, I really love like how you tied it to um not only religion but like situating it in the conversation of like how this her work is kind of could be like a framework for like collective like liberation. And I it really love like what Nia brought up as well, with the idea of the long and wide self, like staying attuned to like how change, um like personal and individual change is like necessary in order to like be liberated like toward like the collective, I guess. um I think that I the way that like you described it, Stephanie, was like really, really hopeful. And for me, I think that it
is like a really like radical thing to see like such open and like conversation with something as like difficult as like religion like happening like around Lauren and like the people that she was interacting with, but not only like religion but like survival or like just like finding like common ground like with the people that she was with, or like helping to like situate everybody like on common ground like in regard to like value systems. um but I think like yeah, like just had like I think the thing that I like got from it is like having like open conversation that is like encourage it, like recognizes the things that like need to be changed and like how in what ways like change can occur is like the essence of like that is like radical like in itself. And that is like exactly that's what we're doing here. That's so awesome.
So I have just full of questions tonight, so sorry guys. But she was kind of in a community to start with, and it didn't work out because like what Stephanie was saying about like there being like some bad apples. And then that kind of reminded me how later in the book, when she was talking to Bankole about Earthseed, he was like, well, people are going to change this to be like for their like they're gonna religions always are changed. They're like this,
It's going to be made to agenda.
yes, it's going to be changed to people's own ideas, for better or for worse. And also, the whole book was her starting this new community. So my question would kind of be, I really see Bankole's pessimistic side here. And I think my question would be, how do you ensure a community stays the positive, well-vetted, so to speak, well-informed, connected community that Lauren's able to kind of, create in the book? Like, did the old community that she was in fail because it wasn't related, it wasn't joined in that same way that Lauren's able to do now? Or did it just fail because it became a larger community and eventually people are just not all going to agree, and that's just kind of an inevitable? What do you guys think?
Bryn, that was such a good question. I think this is like a really relevant like inquiry to like anything like in regards to like uh how like how we can like make change and like the actionable steps that like people can take to like ensure that positive change happens. And like there's like the question of like, is it like a systemic institutional like thing that needs to happen, or is it the question of like should we be changing like hearts and minds like and the like consensus is often like that it needs to be like on all like grounds, but like there when were we talking about, oh well, like how she I don't remember when, but the like everybody has to like be on board. Yeah, which is like so like in
about that, like anytime a new member would come in, she kind of like went and talked to them on their own. She like vibe checked everyone basically. She wasn't like, you have to join us, but she was like, you have to be okay with us.
Yeah, and I think it totally is like an individual, like it is on like an individual like personal basis that like these conversations like need to be happening, but it like because it is subjective, like how like these topics like relate to everyone's own like values and goals, but um I that is a lot of work, and especially for like the people who are actually like instigating these, like all of the Laurens that exist out on the world, which often like lies on the backs of like marginalized groups and like people of color who are like doing the teaching, and the also the bearing the weight of like empathy and just like Lauren. And I think there is like the expectation, like yeah, like yes, we need to be like doing as much as we can to like teach people and like changing hearts and minds, but there also should be, I think, like just out in the world, like a higher expectation for like the personal like personal expectations for like educating oneself and like aligning oneself with the values of like the liberatory work that you would like you're engaging with. um yeah, I don't know, I had a lot of thoughts there. And higher expectations to be like a good community member, and then also that brings up the question of like, but how do we, and then accountability, like how do we keep people accountable? um yeah, that's all that I have, but great question.
Okay, so I'm trying to pick which point I want to jump off from what Morgan just said, but maybe this kind of shifts it a little bit. But with what Morgan was saying about just like change and understanding a concept and like seeing how it can um like meld into different things depending on like what people want to grasp from it, and also going back to our conversation about time. One of the things that has been a reoccurring theme um is a very basic idea such as feminism, which we can all like pinpoint in our minds. Something that I've been talking a lot with my friends about, especially like Douglas when he was talking about his class, but it's very interesting to see the way that people of color have imagined futures and given like the framework for futures for all of us in the past, like countless times before, and the way that these can be like co-opted, reworked, reimagined, to benefit people who already like have power in like those situations. So going back to our previous book of the month author, Bell Hooks, she wrote a book called Feminism is for Everybody, and it's a pretty short book where she kind of just like breaks down feminism, what feminism was like meant to be and what the original ideas of like feminism were, and how feminism like changed into what most people believe feminism to be, which is like a feminism that does center like white women, like who white wealthy women. um I think in that very same way, like we hold the same fear for like Earthseed, something that an empathetic Black woman is like bringing into the environment and like having to share with multiple people. Right now, she is surrounded by people who share like marginalized identities in like certain ways, but we still hold like that hesitation of like trying to um find ways to like almost like protect the original framework of Earthseed, and just like going back to the fact that she can like make connections with other people who hold like the same um like power almost, or like affliction, I don't know, you decide, of like hyper empathy. Those are the people that she can like relate to the most, which I haven't read Parable of the Talents yet, but I'm really excited to see like how that part frames out, because I feel like our like answers to what we're asking you about like right now would be answered there. But yeah, I guess the thing that I really wanted to emphasize was the idea that this is a framework that Lauren started. And this is like the framework that this book is being based about, but we are currently living like the realities from like frameworks that countless like specifically Black women have put in play, and everything that I can confidently say that everything that's been like weird or like messed up about it has been as a result of like community members or people who wanted to like co-opt different like branches of these like ideologies in a way that like benefits them.
So going off of like what you and Morgan said then, like how would you like, does anyone have ideas then of like what we as individuals and as community members can do to kind of maintain that accountability and also yeah, just kind of helped to maintain that community and ensure that kind of it's not able to necessarily kind of get co-opted or fall apart, which was what happened with Lauren's prior community. Like, does anyone have like ideas or thoughts on that?
I have some thoughts. So the idea of like, I don't know, things getting taken and co-opted and then like tarnished, or they make a tool a weapon. It makes me think a lot for some reason about Pedagogy of the Oppressed, if anybody's read that book, and how this book focuses specifically on the educational system and like how to like teach people. And I think what that book proposes and does well, and like what I think would help with like accountability and almost accountability insurance is using like frameworks from that. So it's like it centers on, so basically it kind of proposes, and it's been so many years since I've read this book, not so many, but like a few years since I've read this book, but it proposes like you go into a community, you kind of like study it in order to create the curriculum, like sociologists, psychologists, you build it off of what is actually relevant to the people and like what matters and is important to them, so that they feel like they can actually engage with the content. And then through that, you get the baseline, okay, what is relevant? And then you start building like, not a Socratic seminar, but like you have like almost like this book club where it's discussion based learning and stuff like that, where I don't know, basically I think that like in communities that are potentially, especially like Earthseed, that are at risk for co-optation, I think the way to refocus is to like bring it back to like, because also in the book it was about educating like the most oppressed people. Like you go into like some of the most like rural, disenfranchised, low resource communities. So it's like seeking out the people in your community that are of the lowest resources, what's relevant to them, what's important to them, and like putting that, like making sure that it's like core to the framework, and then building off of that, I think is going to help prevent whatchamacallit, like it being like stolen or perverted in a way. But also I feel like a lot of us aren't going to have a ton of answers because we haven't existed in that many communities where like this has been a practice for us. I feel like it's like the way that like we're living in frameworks that were developed by like people before us. Like we need to have like, we won't understand kind of what we're facing until we're faced with it, and that's when we're going to reach into like the frameworks of the past. I don't know what I'm saying.
What you were saying, Dee, about I think it was like the teaching method. Is that kind of like what like a Montessori program would be? Or is that like, or is that different? Okay, wait.
So Montessori, from my understanding, is more like individual-led curriculums. So like I think they do obviously have to follow a baseline of like information that they teach in the Montessori's, but the people I've known who've gone to Montessori schools have talked about that it's like super individualized, where I think in what like Paolo Fieri, I'm probably butchering his name, is like very communal based, and it talks a lot about the banking method of learning. So it's like you deposit information just to respond it back out. It's not about, so like true learning comes from like building off of connections and like one to kind of like jumping around. And I don't think there's as much room for that in Montessori because it is an individualized practice. Also, I lost my point, but yeah.
Okay, I got what you're saying. Thank you.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the burden of empathy. Because like this has been something that's come up in a lot of like my life, especially when I was like more heavily involved in like Twitter spheres and whatnot, where I did not have a lot of forgiveness for people, especially in like high school and whatnot, for people who didn't see the world similarly to me, in the sense of like, how do you not like, how are you going to say Black lives, like be anti like a slogan like Black Lives Matter or all these different social issues? Like I just like isolated myself and was completely dumbfounded because I'm like, how can you not have empathy for these people? Like, how can you not understand? So I feel like, and I think a lot of that is rooted to certain education and access and whatnot that I've had, but also like, I think there something about like the burden of empathy is always on people who've like been hurt first. So it's like you're struck first and then you feel this pain. And for some people, like that pain allows them to breach, it takes them to a more human, so like a pain that goes beyond an individualized pain of like what actually happened, and you can break into the realm of human pain. And like that experience of pain, that first blow, allows you to like do the kind of connecting that is necessary to see how it all works for others. Is there any instances or any influences for other people that were like a trigger for some of their like empathy journeys? And does anyone have recommendations on how to be more empathetic to people who are like would be considered oppressors? Because I find I have very little empathy. I will ice a bitch out.
I don't know if this is really have to do with like empathy, but I know in my gender, sex, and power class, I had this reading. I think it was like a 2-page reading, and I should really have my iPad with me so I can just quote it straight from him. But it talks about how like in, and I guess we all know this, but like it, even for everybody, there's certain sets of like privilege that we have, no matter like what our identity is, and how it talks about, I guess, like the battle of like, I think it talks about like the battle of being like like an understanding person, and then also like giving up that privilege. So I'll send that after, but I think it for me, well, for me, at least I would say for being in high school, a lot of times I like transferred high schools from a place I would consider to be like pretty diverse to like where I moved to in Ohio. Mason, shout out Mason for anyone who who's been to Kings Island. But I was part of like a club that had to do a lot with like diversity and inclusion initiatives. And I think being like empathetic towards people, when I joined the club, I don't know, I think a lot of it was about like story sharing and like the different stories that people had. So of course we were Mike, because Mixed Inclusion Club, because everyone had a voice. That's why we were the Mike. Anyways, but I think it's hard because you just have to like, I think kind of like was it Bell Hooks or something like that, who was like, I think when you're looking at like oppressive systems, you have to look at it in like terms of like a relationship. So like you have to look at how it affects the other party too. So I guess that was always how I tried to look at it. It's hard. We read that Will to Change. We all saw it. We were like, damn, so this is what you really want us to do. But I think just understanding the relationship part, about how it, I guess, negatively, how I guess maybe that ignorance or whatever it is from the other side of the party, like how that negatively affects them in their lives too. I don't know if that makes sense.
To answer the question about like, I guess, an experience that like challenged my personal empathy journey is like having a friend who kind of like grew up from a different background, and I guess like for lack of a better word, she's just kind of like country, like not really, but she just like doesn't, she says a lot of things that like maybe you could say are like politically incorrect, but also like they can be very ignorant and like offensive, even though I know she has like, she doesn't have any bad intentions behind them. Also, like she like is kind of someone who like struggles with like social cues and being, you know, like that sort of thing. And so I have found it like very hard to draw the line with her between like, I guess like trying to kind of educate her on certain things she says and why it could potentially, those things could potentially be offensive to like people of like minority groups or like etc. And she is like kind of asking me questions and not like challenging me, but not really understanding the concept. And then I find myself becoming like frustrated because then I'm thinking like, even from reading Alice Wong, I was like, it's not like, whose job is it to educate her? Because I feel like, even though I'm willing to do it as a friend, obviously, because I don't know, like if you ask me, I'm willing to obviously discuss it, but at a certain point I get frustrated, like when it's occurring so many times, and I'm like, no offense, but it's your own responsibility to educate yourself. I'm happy to like, I don't know, like provide you with resources and stuff like that, but it's like frustrating to me as a friend because even some things she says, like comments she makes, like offend me personally, but I don't really know how to approach that. So that's like, I don't know if anyone has any like similar experience with that, but that's just something I've experienced.
Absolutely. One thing that like I think is interesting when you brought up the point about Alice Wong, like whose responsibility is it to teach these, like to be like an educator. It made me think a lot about like, again, back to like the high school, the resentment, because I found a lot of like my politics were to some extent shaped by the internet. And it's like, I did not achieve these from the library. Like I achieved these from social media. And like, how is it that I am on the same internet and have had access to things that all my other peers of the same resources, the same backgrounds have had, but were led to such different places? And I do understand that there's like echo chambers and stuff, and I think that does inform an opinion, but I was always just so obstinate that like, we're on the same internet. It's like your job to educate yourself. However, I do think the role of educating people is, I would hope, like I've been so averse to it in the past, but like I need to understand like my positionality in terms of like, I would much rather talk to a racist person about their racism than put like a person who's actually like of a racial minority in a position to have that, like I'm the one that needs to have the conversation. But also another thing that I thought of when you brought up the education point and how you were talking about how you talked a lot to your friend about some of these ideas, but they just didn't seem to like melt in. I think a lot of it too matters who is doing the educating, because like I think there's certain people who, due to, if you meet a certain amount of identities, I don't think this is a conscious decision on their part, but it's like they don't like their ears will turn off. They don't see the opinion, they don't see the humanity. And so it's like, how do we make not asking us, but it's like a rhetorical question, I guess. So like, how do you make the determination of like who's ready for educating, who is best to be the educator for this person, and like, how is it going to be received? I don't know, like how do we create conditions where the message can be best received?
Okay, I actually have been in your exact situation, Amy, with multiple friends. And I would say, look, some of them just aren't going to be your friends anymore if you know, it's not going to turn out great for everybody, but I think that the way that I look at it in terms of like, you know, kind of like taking that like burden almost to like be more educational and kind of like put yourself out there. Because I feel like when you're educating someone about a lot of these things, especially if it's about a personal identity to you, it really feels like you're putting yourself on the line. And I think that what helps me think about it is like not thinking about it that much. Like, okay, I don't have to think about, okay, am I going to always have to be in this position? Is this always how it's going to be? To me, I feel like the experience that I think about most when I think about this type of thing is introducing myself with my pronouns, because I'm in a lot of spaces, especially being in aviation, where they've not heard of pronouns. I have had actually all of my flight instructors that I have had over the years, I have had to explain what pronouns are to them. And look, some people, it's just not going to be worth it. But I feel like, to me, I think about it like, am I going to be interacting with this person for a while? Like a flight instructor? Yes, I am. And also, even if it is hard for me to do so, I feel like at the end of the day, if it can create a little bit of positive change, or maybe just to the point where the positivity is just that I'm not going to be the next person who tells it to them is not going to have to be the first person to say it to them. It's going to kind of like maybe make it just a little bit easier to think about. And I also feel like just maybe not being so hard on yourself if you feel like you're just not in that position. Because I have so many, like at work, I just don't introduce myself. I straight up don't know half my coworkers' names. I work with a bunch of men and I just go to work and I put earbuds on. And I just like, honestly, I work like a late shift. I just don't feel like it half the time of like talking about it. And so I just think that's like the thing to think about is like, okay, like also, especially if it's your friend, maybe like taking like a like intentional time to be like, hey, I really wanted to like talk with you about these things. And also before going into that, because I also had friends that I've had to like, especially when I was kind of coming out to myself and then coming out to my friends, had a lot of friends who just never had a trans friend before. And I feel like what prepped me for a lot of those conversations was thinking what I needed from myself in those conversations, like what are my own personal boundaries with this conversation? Like at what point it is not going to be healthy for me to continue this conversation before going into it, so that maybe it just doesn't get like, it doesn't have the opportunity to turn so negative that you feel so drained afterwards. So I think that those would be like my tips. It's not perfect, and that's just kind of how I do things. It doesn't have to be how you do things, but that's kind of how I think about it.
Kind of the way I think about conversing with people that you disagree with, and like kind of talking to somebody about like behavior that you don't like. I've had a number of conversations with Christian fundamentalists on my campus, and some of them have gone poorly and some of them have gone a little bit better. And I think the spaces where I've actually been able to, I don't know if I've changed their mind, but at least I feel like I've changed their mind a little bit, have been the times when I've actually tried to listen to them as much as I possibly can before I provide my opinion, because I feel like a lot of times, and I've also had this with people in my family who have like had like sexist remarks or racist remarks. I feel like if you can seek to understand exactly where that person's coming from and to clarify their argument instead of just like immediately straw manning it, I think you have a much bigger chance of allowing them to actually change their opinion. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to say.
And I think that can be harder for some people than others, and in certain situations. I know I've been, faced with that, and it was like, you know what, I'm actually not going to deal with this. Yeah, and just like cut communication, because yeah. So it's also like it's also what you're capable of doing. But yeah, I really appreciate this conversation. I was looking through some of the questions too, and some of them caught my eye. I was wondering, what are your recurring dreams? I thought that was really cool. And if that's like hard to answer or weird, or if you don't dream, how do you honor rain and water?
Just adding on to what Nia said about reoccurring dreams, we want to like also open that up to, what do you like daydream about? Where does your mind like naturally wander to? And paying attention to like the situations where like your mind wanders to that place. So like, for example, even talking like with what Douglas was mentioning earlier, with like his being at a school, or like my experience being at a PWI, like I feel like when I'm on campus, or like I'm in a classroom where I'm the only like person of color there, that's when my mind like starts to like wander into places of like, oh, what would like a school environment, or what would this conversation look like if it was like with different people. But yeah, just like broadening the idea of like dreams.
I'm so sorry, this doesn't have anything to do with dreams, but I just wanted to share with you guys, because I go to a college called Evergreen State College out here in Washington, and the school is a PWI. It's not like great for a lot of reasons, but there's a separate school on the campus called the Native Pathways Program, which is like, I think everybody, all the faculty except for one person, is Indigenous, and it focuses primarily on different, like each class is like focused in Indigenous studies pertaining to different, just like art and food justice. There's lots of things. I honestly forgot why I said that. It sounded so, it what you said reminded me of that, and okay.
That's like a perfect segue, because I feel like so many of the things that are being talked about like in the book relate to like indigeneity. Even like the title, Parable of the Sower, like, and parable stories, dream, it could all be connected back to that. So thank you for sharing.
If we're talking about recurring, well, okay, I'll just answer the recurring dreams question. So when I was younger, I used to have a recurring dream. I used to be like a not a professional swimmer, but I did it all the time. And I would have these dreams where I was swimming through the air and someone was always chasing me. And so the faster I'd swim, the faster I would like get away. But sometimes it was in the neighborhood. And then one time it was on a ship. And I think it was a ship from that franchise with Johnny Depp and Keira Knightley, where they're pirates, Caribbean.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
And also Ella Enchanted was in that one.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty epic. But in terms of daydreams, I find maybe TMI, my brain does go to time, but also but
He's having great days, guys.
I guess so. But I think always, or at least especially when I was younger, so much of my daydreams would be myself inserting a character that I made in my head, or like me personified into a narrative that already existed, and I would just like daydream forever about it. So it's like I was in the Percy Jackson series. I would like I like lived through all these different things in my head because I was able to insert myself in, and those were my dreams were stories basically that I consumed. Are you gonna go?
No, that's cool.
Yeah, awesome comment. I also agree with that. Um, maybe possibly changing the direction slightly. I thought it was very interesting how Lauren was able to harness those dreams and from a very young age be able to like identify which aspects were like really speaking to her and imagine like a vision where it can actually like come into play. I think going a little bit back to our conversation of like empathy and communicating ideas to people that don't like necessarily agree with us. I thought it was very interesting to read about Lauren's experience communicating her dreams to her father, someone who is already like a preacher and religious figure with like a set of ideas and values that he was like his basically his own mission that like he was trying to convey, and understanding like the father and daughter dynamic of how much love that they both exchange to each other and like share in their relationship despite having differing views. um and Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. But okay, sorry, I need a moment. I'm back. I did need just one moment. But I thought it was so interesting the way she was able to talk to her dad and how her dad was able to still extend like empathy towards his daughter and like, hey, these are your dreams. And like yeah, he does ask her to kind of like ignore her dreams like in general, but he is able to channel like her dedication and her framework that he doesn't fully understand into things that are much more like palatable, not only like for him, but able to be integrated in the community. And it was so interesting to me that the first thing that he brought up was being an educator and the role of like education that he thought that it would be like beneficial for Lauren to pursue, and the way she like takes that role with like, I think her name was like Amy, like the not Amy said, but Amy the story who like is like the the ignored like community member who sorry, who like she like takes under her wing and like teaches, and yeah, just like roles in a society that like do demand like strong like empathy holders, whatever you can get out of that.
I had I don't know, kind of like a remaining thought that I don't know if we like talked about this so much, but it relates to what Amy was talking about earlier. with like friends and just kind of like our whole conversation. So I don't know if you guys actually ended up reading the parable of the sower, like the parable in the Bible, but I actually didn't know anything about the book and read the parable first and then read the book. And then I read it again after reading the book. And she kind of had it a little bit in there at the end of the book. But it made me think a lot about our conversations about something that my grandfather said to my mom all the time. And it was like, water the flowers that grow. So like kind of talking about like, you know, when we kind of look at this, when we look at all these topics we've been talking about, like community building, or maybe like kind of that burden of empathy, and like who to talk to and who to maybe spend the time about like educating about certain things. It kind of all came back to me to that parable and to the idea of like, water the flowers that grow, you know, like put the work into what's working. And I feel like that was kind of like, it's something that like I'm someone to get like bogged down on things, especially when something's not working. Like I like, whether it's like, you know, putting together an IKEA table and it's just the parts don't fit, and it's I don't know why they don't fit, they just shouldn't make it that way. Or like it's a friend that like you're just trying and it's just not working out. Like I don't know, I feel like I kind of have to remember that statement of like, you know, put the work into the things that are working and you're going to get kind of the best results from that.
Okay, we're gonna start wrapping everything up. If anybody has any last thoughts, final thoughts they want to share, now is the time.
I also made a playlist with Lauren and Ellen this past Wednesday, so I'll send that in the chat. It was just like an Octavia Butler-ish. So like a little bit of Parable, a little bit of Kindred, in the chat. So yeah.
Yes, we did a like little radio show on Dougie's Dimension Arouse radio show. So we will be posting that to the YouTube. Okay, if no one has any other thoughts, we are going to turn to Lauren to introduce our next book of the month.
Okay, everyone. So for our March book of the month, we're going to be reading Embroideries by Marjane Satrapi. And it's a graphic novel. So yay, that's so exciting. Basically, it's about like an afternoon in her life kind of told through this graphic novel, where she's talking to all of the women in her family just about lots of different topics. They talk about like sex, relationships, and she's like getting basically, this is how Stephanie explained it to us when she was like pitching this book, but I thought it was a good way to explain it. It's all things that she hasn't heard before, like from these figures in her life. So yeah, we're going to be reading that, and we're super excited to explore like the genre of graphic novels and kind of get into that more, maybe do some interactive activities with that. But yeah.
Guys, this book is literally so good. You could find it on everywhere, PDF for free. You could check it out at the library. It actually is so funny and very lighthearted. In the mood for spring break, which please enjoy spring break and be safe. But yeah, this is one that you'll definitely want to read.
Thank you guys so much for coming and sharing. Book club is the best part of the month. And we're so thankful for all of you.
Yeah, the last thing, guys, look at the media map and look at the emergency kit resource. Y'all better have your emergency kit because she told you. She gave it to you as homework. Let's have a workshop day where we pack our to-go bags. But no, we've already seen um how vulnerable Earth can be with like the whole water thing that happened. But yeah. Look at the media map, look at the resources, listen to the playlist, and for next month too. Thank you.
Are you guys okay? Like in Ohio?
Yeah, I was like, that is such a loaded question.
No, but like everybody's asking me like, what's going on?
Our water in Columbus is fine. I use Florida. Personally, I have been drinking my tap water and I'm fine. I have yet to see any adverse side effects to tap water.
Okay, and then you can breathe.
Yeah.
Well, also, I think that Columbus gets the water from a different source. Like we don't have the same water source as like what is it? The Ohio River, East Palestine.
Yeah, East Palestine. I think it looked, yeah.
I think we take ours from the Scioto.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure.
I have a question related to the Norfolk explosion. So do y'all say Palestine or Palestine? I don't know what's the correct way to say it is, and I want to be accurate.
Like the Ohio town?
I mean, irregardless, if I see the word Palestine, should I say Palestine or Palestine?
Well,
Like-
if you're gonna say Palestine, you should say it with an F, like Philistine, because that's what it is in Arabic.
Oh, okay.
They don't have a P.
Whoa.
But if you're gonna say in English, it's like Palestine, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Nia.
Okay, thanks everybody for such a good meeting today. Please, we'll see you next month. And we'll be keeping you updated.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time today, everybody.
Bye.
Guys. Nia, it was awesome seeing you again.
Yeah, holy shit. I'm coming to Ohio soon, so
Should hang.
text me.
Brazil.
Oh, I just, that's like a YouTube
Bye,
comment
everybody.
all the time. It's like one of my
Bye, Douglas.
favorites.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Franz.
Bye, friends.